Al Capone. Born in Brooklyn in 1899, Alphonse Gabriel Capone rose from street gangs to control one of the most powerful criminal empires during Prohibition. By his mid-20s, he'd become the boss of the Chicago Outfit, a group that specialized in illegal liquor distribution, gambling, racketeering, and prostitution. At his peak, Capone's empire reportedly brought in over $100 million a year. He used bribery, intimidation, and outright violence to keep city officials and law enforcement off his back. Capone was known for using brutal enforcement squads. One of the most infamous events tied to him was the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929, when 7 members of a rival gang were lined up and executed in a garage. Though there was never enough evidence to charge him directly, the message was loud and clear. He ruled through fear. He also kept a tight public image, donating to charities and presenting himself as a businessman. By 1931, federal agents finally nailed him, not for murder or bootlegging, but for tax evasion. He was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. He served time in several facilities, including Alcatraz, and his health started to fall apart due to untreated syphilis. He was released in 1939, but by then, he was no longer a threat. He died in 1947 in Florida at age 48. Capone's criminal career was short but left a lasting mark. His operation used accountants, lawyers, and enforcers in ways that were advanced for organized crime back then. He managed to blend violence, corruption, and public relations into one massive enterprise. Capone wasn't just feared, he was studied, and every major mob group since has copied something he started. John Gotti. Born in the Bronx in 1940, John Gotti became the head of the Gambino crime family, the most powerful mafia group in America during the 1980s. He gained power by orchestrating the murder of Paul Castellano in 1985 outside a Manhattan steakhouse. That hit shocked the underworld and put Gotti right at the top. He was known for his flashy suits, slick back hair, and constant appearances in the tabloids, which earned him the nickname the Dapper Don. Gotti ran operations in extortion, illegal gambling, loan sharking, and narcotics distribution. He relied heavily on his underboss Sammy Gravano, who helped expand their influence and manage internal disputes. Gotti also avoided conviction multiple times throughout the late 1980s, earning him another nickname, the Teflon Don, because charges just wouldn't stick. He was always surrounded by bodyguards, used code words during conversations, and held meetings in motion to avoid surveillance. But things started to fall apart when the government flipped Gravano. In 1992, with Gravano's testimony, Gotti was convicted on 13 counts including murder and racketeering. That trial ended his criminal reign and he was sentenced to life without parole. He was sent to a high-security prison in Illinois and kept under strict conditions. His health declined over time, and he died of throat cancer in 2002. Gotti controlled his image tightly and operated with a mix of charisma and cruelty. He approved murders with no hesitation, but also demanded discipline and loyalty from his men. His leadership style was aggressive and personal, often skipping traditional mafia protocols. The damage from his arrest and trial severely weakened the Gambino family. No mob boss since has had the same mix of media obsession and criminal clout that Gotti pulled off. Feel free to smash that like and subscribe button for more content like this. Anyways, Carlo Gambino. Born in Sicily in 1912, Carlo Gambino immigrated to the United States in 1921 and quietly climbed the ranks of organized crime. He became a made man in his 20s and was part of the Mangano family, which later became the Gambino family. Unlike flashier mobsters, Gambino stayed out of the spotlight, preferring to operate behind the scenes. He took control of the family in 1957 after the murder of Albert Anastasia, a hit many believe Gambino orchestrated with Vito Genovese. Under Gambino's leadership, the family grew into the most powerful of the 5 families in New York. They were heavily involved in loan sharking, extortion, labor racketeering, and illegal gambling. Gambino formed alliances with key figures across the country, including Meyer Lansky and the Chicago Outfit. He also had major influence over the NCAA, shipping unions, and construction contracts. He kept his organization disciplined and avoided drug trafficking, which he believed drew too much heat. That decision helped the family avoid the federal attention that plagued other families. Gambino was known for his calm demeanor, strict control, and strategic planning. He rarely used phones, avoided cameras, and refused to engage with the media. His name rarely appeared in news headlines while he was alive, but behind the scenes, he controlled millions in criminal revenue every year. He died of natural causes at his Long Island home in 1976. His death caused no internal war, showing how tightly he'd controlled succession plans. Paul Castellano, his cousin and brother-in-law, was handpicked to lead next. Gambino's ability to manage violence without chaos made him one of the most respected and feared mob bosses of all time. His legacy shaped how the Mafia operated for decades. Charles Luciano. Born in Sicily in 1897, Charles Lucky, Luciano moved to New York as a child and began building his criminal resume in his teens. He got his nickname after surviving a brutal beating and stabbing by rival gangsters, an attack that left his face partially paralyzed. He was a key player in reshaping the Mafia from disorganized street gangs into a national syndicate. Luciano worked under Joe Masseria, but later plotted with rival boss Salvatore Riina to eliminate him. After Masseria was murdered in 1931, Luciano turned on Riina too, clearing the way to take control. He then created the Commission, a governing body made up of the heads of the 5 families, along with bosses from Chicago and other cities. This system was designed to settle disputes and maintain order, moving away from constant infighting. He made his fortune through illegal gambling, narcotics trafficking, and prostitution. Luciano also maintained deep ties with corrupt politicians and law enforcement. In 1936, prosecutor Thomas Dewey finally nailed him with a conviction for running a massive prostitution ring, landing him a 50-year sentence. But in 1946, during World War II, he struck a deal with the US government to help secure the New York docks from sabotage in exchange for a reduced sentence. He was deported to Italy that same year. Even from exile, Luciano maintained influence over the American mob. He held meetings in Havana and tried to keep control from abroad, though his power eventually declined. He died of a heart attack in Naples in 1962. Luciano's legacy lies in how he structured modern organized crime. He didn't just rise through violence, he built a system that lasted long after he was gone. Vito Genovese. Born in Italy in 1897, Vito Genovese immigrated to the United States as a teenager and quickly found a place in organized crime. He rose under Giuseppe Masseria but later switched sides during the Castellano War, helping Charles Luciano consolidate power. Genovese became Luciano's underboss and played a central role in forming the Commission. In 1937, facing a murder indictment, Genovese fled to Italy, where he built ties with Mussolini's fascist regime and profited from black market operations during World War II. He even received honors from the Italian government while staying active in the criminal underworld. After the war, US authorities brought him back to face charges, but the key witness was mysteriously murdered before trial. By the late 1950s, Genovese was determined to take over the Mafia. He had Frank Costello shot, forcing him into retirement, and pushed Albert Anastasia out of the way with the help of Carlo Gambino. After taking full control of the family in 1957, he renamed it the Genovese family. That same year, he hosted the Appalachian Meeting, a massive gathering of mob bosses that was busted by police. It exposed the Mafia's national structure to the public. Shortly after, Genovese was convicted on narcotics charges thanks to testimony from informants he didn't expect. He was sentenced to 15 years and imprisoned in Atlanta, where he continued to issue orders until his death from a heart attack in 1969. Genovese was ruthless and ambitious, and his leadership style relied on fear and manipulation. He tried to centralize power under himself, but his aggressive moves led to more scrutiny and arrests. Still, the structure he influenced helped define how the modern Mafia functions. Frank Costello. Born in Italy in 1891 and raised in East Harlem, Frank Costello earned the nickname the Prime Minister for his influence over politics and business. He got involved in crime early, working with Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky. Together, they formed powerful alliances that blended traditional Mafia tactics with modern racketeering strategies. Costello didn't climb through violence. He used connections, cash, and charm to gain control. He officially took over the Luciano family in 1936 after Luciano was in prison. Costello focused on gambling, which became the family's biggest income source. He ran slot machines across New York and Louisiana and had judges, cops, and city officials in his pocket. His calm demeanor and public respectability helped him blend into elite circles. He even testified before Congress during the Kefauver hearings in 1951, bringing rare public attention to Mafia influence over American institutions. But not everyone appreciated his style. Vito Genovese wanted more power and saw Costello as soft. In 1957, Genovese ordered a hit that failed. Costello survived, but stepped down. That opened the door for Genovese to take over. Despite the attempt on his life, Costello remained influential behind the scenes. He had built such a strong network that many still came to him for advice and arbitration. Costello avoided major prison time and continued living in luxury, something rare for mob bosses. He died of a heart attack in 1973 at his Manhattan home. His ability to operate as both a gangster and a pseudo-legitimate businessman gave him a unique place in Mafia history. He didn't rule through fear, he ruled through influence. And while he wasn't as flashy as others, he was just as powerful in shaping organized crime's reach into American society. Paul Castellano. Born in Brooklyn in 1915, Paul Castellano was related to Carlo Gambino by marriage and used that connection to climb within the Gambino family. Unlike most mobsters, he saw himself as more of a businessman than a street boss. He focused on white-collar crime, like construction rackets, labor unions, and bid rigging. He also ran Dial Poultry, a major meat distribution business, which served as a legal front for laundering money. When Gambino died in 1976, Castellano was chosen as his successor, bypassing Agnello Della Croce, a longtime underboss who was more popular with the street guys. That decision split the family. Castellano operated from a mansion in Staten Island, lived like a CEO, and often kept himself isolated. He banned drug trafficking under his leadership, but many ignored that rule, including people close to John Gotti. Castellano's leadership was marked by arrogance and detachment. He avoided traditional mob gatherings and surrounded himself with businessmen instead of soldiers. His decision to install Thomas Bilotti as underboss after Della Croce's death in 1985 pushed tensions even further. That same year, Castellano was indicted in the Commission case and was already facing charges from the earlier Mafia Commission investigations. In December 1985, Castellano and Bilotti were gunned down outside Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan, a hit arranged by Gotti without Commission approval. The murders shocked the underworld and completely reshaped the Gambino family. Castellano's refusal to connect with street-level members and his obsession with operating like a corporate boss made him vulnerable. He may have tried to modernize the Mafia structure, but his leadership style created deep resentment. His murder marked the end of the old guard and the start of a more aggressive and public era under Gotti. Salvatore Riina. Born in Corleone, Sicily in 1930, Salvatore Riina became one of the most violent mafia bosses in Italian history. He joined the Corleonesi faction of the Sicilian Mafia and rose through the ranks by orchestrating a series of murders that eliminated rivals and consolidated his power. By the early 1980s, he had full control of the Sicilian Mafia and led a brutal internal war that left hundreds dead. Riina's leadership was built on fear. He ordered the assassinations of high-ranking members of rival mafia families, law enforcement officials, judges, politicians, and even civilians. His campaign of terror included car bombings, mass shootings, and torture. Two of his most infamous targets were anti-mafia judges Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, who were both killed in separate bomb attacks in 1992. Those killings outraged the public and forced the Italian government to respond with unprecedented crackdowns. He avoided arrest for decades by living in secrecy, using a network of loyal associates and maintaining strict control over communication. His decision-making was centralized, no move happened without his approval, but his growing list of enemies and the public backlash finally caught up with him. In 1993, Riina was captured in Palermo after 23 years as a fugitive. Even from prison, Riina continued to issue orders. He was given multiple life sentences and spent the rest of his life in solitary confinement. He died in 2017 in a prison hospital. Riina's reign marked a turning point for the Sicilian Mafia. His violent tactics drew massive law enforcement attention and helped push the Mafia from secrecy into full confrontation with the state. His legacy is one of bloodshed, paranoia, and the collapse of old Mafia traditions in Sicily. Meyer Lansky. Born in Poland in 1920 and raised in New York City, Meyer Lansky became one of the most financially skilled figures in organized crime. He was a close associate of Charles Luciano and helped build the National Crime Syndicate in the United States. Lansky never led a crime family himself, but he was the financial architect behind many of their operations. He specialized in money laundering, casino management, and offshore banking. He started out running street-level gambling operations with childhood friend Bugsy Siegel, but his real talent was numbers. Lansky helped create efficient systems for skimming profits, hiding assets, and reinvesting money into legitimate businesses. He played a major role in establishing the Havana casino scene in Cuba, which became a hub for organized crime profits until the Cuban Revolution shut everything down in 1959. Lansky also advised bosses from multiple families and helped keep the Mafia's financial dealings clean and hidden. He had investments in casinos in Las Vegas, the Bahamas, and other parts of the Caribbean. Despite years of surveillance and investigations, he was only convicted once for illegal gambling and served a short sentence. He was indicted for tax evasion in the 1970s, but managed to avoid conviction. In 1970, he tried to move to Israel under the law of return, but was eventually deported. He returned to the United States and continued living quietly while maintaining influence. He died of lung cancer in Miami in 1983. Authorities believed he had stashed hundreds of millions, but much of it was never found. Lansky was never flashy or violent. He relied on intelligence, strategy, and long-term planning. His influence reached across crime families, and he helped give the Mafia a business model that lasted for decades. Bugsy Siegel. Born in Brooklyn in 1960, Benjamin Bugsy Siegel started as a street-level thug and became one of the flashiest figures in organized crime. He co-founded the violent enforcement arm known as Murder Incorporated and made a name for himself running bootlegging operations during Prohibition. He was close friends with Meyer Lansky, and together they built deep connections with the National Syndicate, especially under Charles Luciano's rise. Siegel's operations included narcotics, illegal gambling, and contract killings, but his most famous move came later, his push to develop Las Vegas as a gambling haven. In the 1940s, he took over the construction of the Flamingo Hotel and Casino, aiming to create a luxury resort in the desert. He poured millions of mob money into the project, but delays, cost overruns, and poor financial management turned it into a disaster. The hotel opened in 1946 but struggled at first, causing tension with investors. The Flamingo eventually turned a profit, but it came too late for Siegel. In 1947, he was shot and killed in Beverly Hills, most likely as a result of losing the syndicate's money. The hit was never officially solved, but his murder sent a clear message. No one was above the organization. Despite his end, Siegel's vision transformed Las Vegas into a cornerstone for organized crime. He brought the idea of combining luxury, gambling, and show business into one destination, something no one else had pulled off at that scale. His charisma, violent temper, and reckless ambition made him stand out, even among mobsters. Siegel didn't just want to be rich, he wanted to be iconic. That mix of ego and enterprise is what made his story so explosive, and ultimately fatal. Sam Giancana. Born in Chicago in 1980, Salvatore Sam Giancana became one of the most politically connected and controversial mob bosses in American history. He started in the outfit's wheelman crew and rose through the ranks by running gambling and extortion rackets with brutal efficiency. By the 1950s, he had full control of the Chicago outfit and expanded its influence into national and international operations. Giancana wasn't just a street boss. He had deep ties with government agencies. He reportedly worked with the Central Intelligence Agency on attempts to assassinate Fidel Castro, using his criminal network to run covert missions. He also maintained connections with high-profile entertainers, including Frank Sinatra, and was rumored to have had a romantic relationship with singer Phyllis McGuire. His presence in Hollywood circles made him stand out from more traditional mob leaders. He controlled major gambling interests in Chicago, Las Vegas, and parts of Central America. Under his leadership, the outfit funneled millions through offshore accounts and used political leverage to keep heat off key operations. But his high profile eventually became a liability. In the 1960s, after refusing to testify before a federal grand jury, he was jailed for contempt. By 1974, after years of tension with outfit leaders, Giancana was living in Mexico under unofficial exile. He returned to the United States in 1974 under government pressure to testify before a grand jury again. Before he could speak, he was shot 7 times in the head while cooking in his Chicago home in 1975. His murder remains unsolved. Giancana's blend of crime, celebrity, and covert activity made him one of the most unpredictable bosses in mob history. He didn't just run rackets, he blurred the line between organized crime and international politics. Joseph Bonanno. Born in Sicily in 1905, Joseph Bonanno immigrated to the United States in 1924 and quickly embedded himself in organized crime during the rise of the American Mafia. He became boss of the Bonanno family, one of the original 5 families, in 1931 after the Castellano's War ended, and Charles Luciano established the Commission. Bonanno's reign would last over 3 decades, making him one of the longest-serving bosses in Mafia history. He focused on traditional rackets like gambling, loan sharking, and extortion, but also kept tight control over his family's internal structure. Bonanno was highly secretive and preferred stability over violence. He stayed close to other powerful figures like Stefano Magaddino in Buffalo and tried to expand influence into Arizona and parts of Canada. However, by the 1960s, Bonanno grew more ambitious and plotted to take over the Commission itself. That led to what became known as the Banana War, an internal power struggle after he was briefly kidnapped in 1964. Whether the kidnapping was staged remains debated, but it sparked years of infighting and brought serious heat on the family. The Commission eventually expelled him and the family fell into disarray. Bonanno later published a memoir claiming to be a man of honor who disapproved of drug trafficking and bloodshed, though law enforcement records tell a more complicated story. He was convicted of obstruction of justice in the 1980s and served a short prison sentence. Unlike most bosses, he lived into old age and died of natural causes in 2002 at the age of 97. Bonanno's long leadership, strategic mind, and attempts to create dynastic control left a lasting mark, but his push for power and defiance of the commission ultimately fractured the family that still bears his name, Whitey Bulger. Born in Boston in 1929, James Whitey Bulger became one of the most feared and elusive crime bosses in American history. He led the Winter Hill Gang, a predominantly Irish-American organization that operated in and around South Boston. His criminal empire included drug trafficking, loan sharking, extortion, and illegal gambling. But what set Bulger apart was his double life. He spent years as an FBI informant while running violent rackets. He began cooperating with the FBI in the 1970s, feeding them information on the Italian Mafia, in exchange for protection. That relationship gave him almost unchecked power in Boston, allowing him to eliminate rivals while law enforcement looked the other way. He and his crew were linked to at least 11 murders, and likely more, often involving extreme violence and intimidation. Bulger disappeared in 1995 after being tipped off about a federal indictment. He vanished for 16 years, landing on the FBI's most wanted list, second only to Osama bin Laden. In 2011, he was finally captured in Santa Monica, California, where he'd been living under an alias with his longtime girlfriend. His trial in 2013 revealed years of corruption, cover-ups, and brutal killings. He was convicted on 31 counts, including 11 murders, and sentenced to life in prison. In 2018, within hours of being transferred to a new prison in West Virginia, he was beaten to death by inmates. Some believed it was a revenge hit tied to his history as an informant. Bulger's story isn't just about crime, it's about betrayal, manipulation, and the toxic mix of criminal power and law enforcement compromise. He maintained control through psychological warfare, strategic alliances, and sheer terror, leaving behind a legacy that still haunts Boston's underworld. Tony Accardo. Born in Chicago in 1960, Anthony Accardo became one of the longest-lasting and most quietly effective mob bosses in American organized crime. He started as a bodyguard for Al Capone and slowly worked his way up, proving himself through discipline and strategy rather than reckless violence. By the 1940s, he was running the Chicago outfit and shifted it from street-level chaos into a structured corporate-style empire. Accardo avoided the limelight and prided himself on staying out of prison. During his entire criminal career, he was never convicted of a serious crime. Under his leadership, the outfit expanded into loan sharking, labor racketeering, illegal gambling, and skimming Las Vegas casinos. He diversified income streams, pushing the outfit into construction, waste management, and unions, all while maintaining influence over politicians and law enforcement. He had a strict code, low profile, no drugs, and minimal violence that would attract attention. Accardo also implemented a decentralized leadership model. Even when he passed day-to-day control to men like Giancana, he continued to pull strings from behind the scenes. His reputation for quiet control and ruthlessness kept internal disputes minimal. In 1978, burglars hit Accardo's home. Shortly after, at least 7 men suspected of involvement were murdered in different locations, in brutal fashion. None of the cases were solved, but the message was clear. Accardo still had reach. He stayed active in the organization into old age and continued advising until his death. He died of respiratory failure in 1992 at age 86. His longevity and lack of criminal conviction made him a standout among mob bosses. He built a legacy not through headlines, but through structure, stability, and calculated power plays that kept the outfit thriving for decades. Tommaso Buscetta. Born in Palermo in 1928, Tommaso Buscetta became one of the most important mafia informants in history. He started his criminal career in Sicily, moved between Italy and Brazil, and became involved in international drug trafficking. A member of the Porta Nuova clan, he was deeply connected to the Sicilian Cosa Nostra and witnessed its transformation into a more violent, centralized force during the rise of the Corleonese faction. In the 1980s, during the Second Mafia War, Buscetta lost several family members, including 2 sons, to Salvatore Riina's brutal purge. That violence, combined with his disillusionment with the organization, pushed him to cooperate with authorities after being extradited to Italy in 1984. He became the first high-ranking mafioso to break the code of silence, or omertà, and testify against the mafia. His testimony, known as the Buscetta Theorems, exposed the inner workings of the Cosa Nostra and identified its hierarchical structure, rituals, and rules. His information helped Italian judge Giovanni Falcone build cases against hundreds of mafiosi, leading to the 1986 Maxi trial, which resulted in over 300 convictions. He also testified in the United States, aiding investigations into the Pizza Connection drug ring and linking American and Sicilian crime syndicates. Buscetta was placed in witness protection, moving between countries under different identities. Despite the Mafia's efforts, including placing a bounty on his head, he survived until his death from cancer in Florida in 2000. His decision to collaborate permanently shifted how law enforcement pursued organized crime. He shattered the Mafia's myth of silence and loyalty, proving that fear could be broken and secrets could be used as weapons. Buscetta's revelations reshaped the global fight against organized crime. Raymond Patriarca. Born in Massachusetts in 1903, Raymond Patriarca became the undisputed boss of the New England crime family, later known as the Patriarca family. He took over in the 1950s and ruled with such tight control that the organization remained unified across Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, something rare among regional mob groups. He operated primarily out of a small storefront in Providence called Coin-O-Matic, a vending machine business that served as the family's headquarters. From there, he directed rackets that included loan sharking, illegal gambling, extortion, and union corruption. Patriarca's word was final. He didn't tolerate insubordination and often settled disputes with calculated violence. But unlike more flamboyant bosses, he kept a low profile, avoided flashy public behavior, and focused on discipline. He also maintained strong ties with the National Commission and built relationships with other crime families in New York. His leadership brought consistency and made the New England crew a serious force. Federal investigators wiretapped Coin-O-Matic in the 1960s, capturing key conversations that would eventually lead to indictments for several top figures. Patriarca himself was convicted in 1969 for a conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced to 10 years. Even while in prison, he continued to run the family through trusted lieutenants. After his release, his health declined, but his influence never fully disappeared. He died of a heart attack in 1984, and his passing marked the end of the family's most stable and powerful era. Patriarca's style combined old-school caution with ruthless control. He wasn't interested in fame, he wanted order, and for decades, he delivered that. The organization he built continued to carry his name long after his death, a rare sign of lasting respect in the world of organized crime. Feel free to smash that like and subscribe button for more content like this.